Hello, everyone, and welcome back to I Create For You. We're going back into the Haunted Pets book with true ghost stories about pets, and it's written by Alan Zulo. The story we're going to be listening to is Bingo's Secret, and afterwards I will be sketching Bingo. Alex Hammond walked up to the gray granite tombstone and bent over to read the inscription. Randall Barron Stevens, born February 22nd, 1951, died August 5th, 1959. So this is where he's buried, said the 15-year-old boy. Yes, replied Aunt Susie, gazing at the grave with a bittersweet look of sadness and fondness. It took a long time for your grandparents, your mother, and I to get over Randy's death. Our little brother was so young, so loved. She kneeled down and pulled out a dandelion and several weeds that had sprouted on the grass over the grave. In a way, Bingo played a part in easing our pain, she said. The love that collie shared with Randy was absolutely incredible. Those two were inseparable, in life and in death. And no one knows about Bingo's secret? No one but our immediate family, and we want to keep it that way. Alex first learned of the secret a few months earlier from his mother, Debbie, the older sister of Randy and Susie. In 1953, Debbie's parents, John and Barbara Stevens, bought Randy a collie puppy for his second birthday. They named the dog Bingo after the family's favorite game. The collie sported a soft wispy coat of snowy white and golden brown, and the strangest bark anyone had ever heard. It sounded like a cross between an old man's cough and a hoarse coyote. Bingo got along fine with the girls and their two cats, but it was clear from the start that he was Randy's dog and lifesaver. Bingo became a hero a year after he arrived. Randy had been taking a nap with his mother when he woke up and walked out the back door. The 3-year-old boy was wandering away from home. When Bingo saw him leave the yard, the collie dashed after him and stayed by his side. Bingo whined, sensing that maybe it wasn't a good idea to be going off like this, but he was a loyal dog who wanted to be with his boy. About a quarter-mile away, they came to a highway. Seeing a shiny coin in the middle of the road, Randy walked out to pick it up, paying absolutely no attention to the traffic. But Bingo did. The collie ran circles around the boy and began barking as cars in each direction screeched to a halt. The motorists wondered if they had been stopped by a mad dog. Bingo stood in the center of the road, blocking cars and even leaping against their fenders to keep them from creeping forward. Just a few feet away sat Randy, innocently playing on the pavement. Motorists looked on in wonder as the dog rushed back to the child and nudged him to the shoulder of the road. But the little boy, thinking it was a game, scurried back to the center of the highway and plopped down, laughing. Finally, a police officer cautiously approached the worried dog and calmed him down so the officer could pick up Randy and carry him to safety. Ever since then, Bingo became extra protective of his master. Part of the reason was because Randy was a frail, often sickly kid, but one who seldom complained and always smiled. The two did everything together. They played, slept, and sometimes even ate together. Once a week on Saturday mornings, Randy and Bingo shared breakfast while watching cartoons on TV. Randy would fix 2 bowls of cereal and take them to the family room, where Bingo was already stretched out in front of the television set. "Okay, let's eat," said Randy. He would sit down on the floor, put one bowl in his lap, and place the other near his dog. Bingo would wag his tail and then slide slowly on his stomach toward the bowl on the floor. While Randy slurped his cereal, the collie would carefully lap up the milk and cereal from his bowl. Bingo soon outweighed Randy. The collie displayed a big heart and an even greater understanding for Randy's physical limitations. The dog was patient with his undersized, often tired master and was careful never to play too rough with him. Whenever they played in the backyard, Bingo would race across the lawn and charge after Randy as if to bowl him over, only to change direction at the last instant and leap past him. Sometimes, to show his impish side, the collie would sneak up behind Randy and playfully push him to the ground. Randy would start laughing and then roll around with his dog. When Randy was 5 years old and in kindergarten, Bingo often trotted over to the schoolyard just to keep an eye on his master. During recess, when the kids were at the playground, Bingo stood watch to make sure that no harm came to Randy, that no bully shoved him. But the dog didn't need to worry because everyone liked Randy. And they especially liked Bingo, who patiently let kids hug and kiss him. In second grade, Randy kept getting sicker, so his parents took him to a specialist who ran many tests. When the results came back, the family's worst fears were realized. Randy was dying of leukemia, cancer of the blood. Back then, there wasn't much doctors could do for such patients. It was only a matter of time before Randy would die. Despite the death sentence, Randy kept his spirits up and hoped for the best. It helped having his best friend Bingo by his side. Although Bingo loved being outside, he chose to stay with Randy in his room, because the dog sensed his master could use the company. On Randy's good days, which were few and far between, Bingo would pick up an old red rubber ball and place it on the bed. Randy would throw it so Bingo could fetch it. The bedroom was small, but the collie didn't mind because he was playing with his master. Then there were the bad days. Days when Randy was too weak to do much more than give his dog a few pats on the head. But the collie never complained. He'd jump up on the bed, scoot over to Randy's hand and lick it, just to let the boy know that his pal loved him. Soon came the moment that Randy dreaded, when he had to go to the hospital to live out his final days. Before leaving the house for the last time, the bedridden boy whispered for his dog to come over. Bingo walked up to the bed and rested his head on the mattress next to Randy's shoulder and looked lovingly at his master. "Bingo," Randy whispered, "I have to go away for a while. I need you to help take care of things, okay? With me gone, the girls in our family will outnumber us boys, so I'm counting on you to help out and be good. But you've always been good. You're the best dog a boy could ever have. Why, you're the best dog in the whole world. Now listen, make sure you wake up Susie and Debbie every Saturday morning and have them get you a bowl of cereal, okay? I've got to go now. Goodbye, Bingo. I love you." Bingo barked that distinctive odd bark of his, then licked the boy's face long and hard. Over the next few days, Bingo seldom ate as he moped around the house. He and Randy had never been separated for more than a day or two, so without Randy, Bingo felt lost. He kept going into Randy's room, lying on his bed, and going out only occasionally when the girls pleaded with him to play. He fetched and chased and roughhoused with them, but his heart wasn't in it. When Randy's health took a turn for the worse, John and Barbara began a bedside vigil at the hospital. Back home, Randy's sisters had just gone to bed under the watchful eye of Mrs. O'Malley, the next-door neighbor and babysitter. She turned on the radio, settled into an easy chair, and began working on her needlepoint. Suddenly, Bingo, who had been curled up on Randy's empty bed, let out a heart-stopping wail. He leapt to the floor, ran into Randy's closet, grabbed a shoe, and darted into the living room. He shook his head from side to side and let the shoe fly across the room, while Mrs. O'Malley looked on in bewilderment. The dog barked and whined, ran around the room like he didn't know what to do, and then tore into Randy's room again. He snatched his shirt off the hanger and dragged it back into the living room, where he whimpered and howled. The commotion woke up the girls. "What's going on?" asked Debbie. "Why is Bingo acting so weird?" "I don't know," Mrs. O'Malley replied. "He has never done this before." "No," said Susie. "Look how he's got Randy's cap." The collie kept picking up and throwing Randy's clothes around the room and making whimpering noises that the girls had never heard before. They tried to comfort him, but he would break free, pick up an item, fling it, and then whine. Bingo finally calmed down after 15 minutes of anguish and went back into Randy's room. An hour later, Randy's parents came home, their faces drained and their eyes red. Without a word being spoken, Mrs. O'Malley knew instantly what had happened. Randy had died. She threw her arms around both grieving parents and joined them in a long cry. "He was such a good little boy," sighed Barbara. "He loved everyone, and oh, how he loved that dog of his." "Bingo!" exclaimed Mrs. O'Malley. "He went crazy tonight. He pulled Randy's things out of the bedroom and dragged them in here, howling and barking." "When did this happen?" asked Barbara. "A little over an hour ago, about 9:30. Barbara turned to her husband and squeezed his hand hard. "John, that's when Randy died. You don't think that Bingo somehow knew, and that's why he carried on so crazily?" "The way those two loved each other, I wouldn't doubt it for a moment," he replied. 2 days later, the tearful Stevens family and many friends and relatives attended a graveside funeral service and buried Randy in Hillside Memorial Cemetery. Among the mourners was the ever-faithful Bingo, his head bowed and tail drooped. When the funeral was over, Bingo refused to leave the grave where his master's coffin had been lowered. "Come on, Bingo, it's time to go," John said softly, gently stroking the sad dog. Bingo didn't even look up. His eyes remained fixed on the grave. "Bingo, we have to go now. Come on, boy." "Let him be, John," said Barbara. "Maybe he needs to have some time alone with Randy. Bingo will come home when he's ready. Besides, the house isn't that far away from here." But by dinner, Bingo had yet to return. As night fell, John got into the car and drove to the cemetery looking for the collie. He found Bingo milling around the gravesite. John got out of his car, walked up to the dog, and kneeled down. "Hi, Bingo. Are you okay, boy? You really miss Randy, don't you?" "We all do. He was a great kid." For the next half hour, John sat on the ground with Bingo and talked about his son, reliving all the good times and even the few bad ones. The talk helped ease the ache in John's heart, and it seemed in Bingo's. "Hey, we better get going now, okay?" said John. When the dog whimpered, John gently grabbed him by the collar and said, "It's okay. Randy understands. We need to go home now and get you some food and water." Reluctantly, the dog left the cemetery. But Bingo refused to eat, even when Barbara cooked him a hamburger and put it in his food dish. That night, the dog slept on Randy's bed. At dawn, the collie was scratching at the back door, barking to be let out. Susie, the first one up, sleepily opened the door, and Bingo charged outside. He streaked through Mrs. O'Malley's yard, cut across the park, and scampered down the sidewalk to the cemetery. When he arrived at Randy's grave, Bingo lay down with his paws outstretched in the front, just like he used to when he and Randy would watch Sunday morning cartoons. And so began the vigil. Every day for the next month, Bingo arrived at the crack of dawn and spent the entire day by Randy's grave. He took naps there, walked around, and kept the squirrels away. The groundskeepers didn't annoy him. In fact, they often gave him scraps of food from their lunch pails, but he seldom ate anything. As the days passed, the dog grew weaker. When he returned home at night, he would take a mouthful of water and a few bites of dog food and then go into Randy's room, which the parents had left exactly as it was when their son was alive. Worried about Bingo's health, Barbara and John took him to the vet's, but the doctor couldn't find anything physically wrong except that the collie was losing weight from lack of eating. "Here, give him some vitamins. Mix it up with his food and feed him by hand if you have to," the vet told him. "If you don't force him to eat, he may not last very long." But despite the best efforts of the Stevens family, Bingo rejected all food other than what John almost forced down the dog's throat. A week after his visit to the vet's, Bingo, now just a shell of his former self, barked weakly to be let out early one chilly, damp morning. His once bright, fluffy white tan coat had taken on a dull luster. His proud head hung low, and his high-stepping gait had been replaced by a slow walk. He never came home. They found Bingo lying on his side atop Randy's grave, with his right paw touching the gravestone of his young master. One of the gravediggers called John at home and broke the news to him. John and Barbara, heartbroken over Bingo's death, went to the cemetery. "What a wonderful, loyal dog," said John, as his eyes welled with tears. He refused to be separated from Randy. Such devotion. He was too choked up to finish his sentence. "John, do you know what Randy would want more than anything?" asked Barbara. "He'd want to have Bingo buried right next to him." "You're right. He'd love that. Let's do it." But when they asked permission, the cemetery director was shocked. "A dog? Buried here? I'm sorry, but that's not possible. This cemetery is for humans only. It's totally against the rules." So the Stevens brought Bingo's body home, where John dug a big hole in the backyard under a tall elm tree. Barbara took Randy's bedspread, which Bingo had always slept on, and wrapped him in it. After they placed his body in the hole, John, Barbara, and the two girls held hands and said their final goodbyes to the dog that had meant so much to Randy. That night, as they were getting ready for bed, Randy's parents were sharing their heartache with each other when Barbara said, "John, shh, do you hear something?" "It sounds like scratching," he answered. "It can't be the girls' cats. They're both in the girls' room." "It's coming from the back door," she said, "like the sound Bingo used to make when he scratched the door to be let in." John ran into the kitchen and flung open the back door. He looked around with a crazy ray of hope that Bingo somehow would be standing outside waiting to be let in. But of course the dog wasn't there. Meanwhile, in the girls' room, the cats began pacing the floor, mewing and meowing with their tails fluffed up out of fear. "What's bugging them?" asked Susie. "Maybe it's something outside," Debbie replied. She opened the window and then shouted for her sister. "Susie, come here quick. What do you hear outside?" There was no doubt about it. Both girls could plainly hear a distinctive bark, a cross between an old man's cough and a hoarse coyote. Mixed in with barks were whimpers, whines, and howls. "That's Bingo!" Susie cried out. "I can tell his bark anywhere." Debbie burst out of the room and almost ran into her parents in the hallway. "Mom, Dad, Bingo's alive. We can hear him barking." "It can't be," Barbara said as she and John raced to the window and peered outside. They also could clearly heard Bingo's bark. "It's coming from the backyard near the elm tree." "That's where we buried Bingo," said John. "Maybe he really is alive. Maybe we buried him by mistake. Maybe he was just in a coma." John dashed out of the room, but the moment he bolted outside, the barking ceased. Still, John sprinted to the freshly dug grave to see if somehow the dog had clawed his way out, but the grave had not been disturbed. "Girls," said John, "we have to face facts. Bingo is dead. What we heard must have been another dog that sounds very much like Bingo." "We know every dog in this neighborhood," said Susie. "We know every dog in this town. There aren't any dogs that sound like Bingo." "Well, maybe it's a stray. Who knows? Come on, let's all get some sleep." The next night, the same barking, accompanied by the mournful whining and howling, continued to haunt the entire family again, keeping them up for much of the night. Determined to find the source of the barking, John searched the entire area, but he found nothing. "Whenever I went to one part of the yard, the barking seemed to come from the other side," he told Barbara. "Sometimes it didn't seem to come from anywhere, and yet it seemed to come from everywhere." The sorrowful barking tore at the hearts of the Stevens family. The girls cried, the parents fretted, and even the cats yowled. "John," said Barbara, "what if it really is Bingo? You know it can't be him. But what if the barking is from Bingo's ghost?" "Bingo's ghost!" he exclaimed, throwing his hands up in the air. "Have you flipped your lid?" "No, I haven't. I think it's Bingo's ghost, and that he'll keep barking until we bury him where he should be buried, next to Randy's grave. Since Bingo and Randy were so close in life, Why shouldn't they remain close in death? But the cemetery director said, John, how about doing what Randy and Bingo would have wanted? He thought a moment and nodded. You know, you're absolutely right. John and Barbara dug up Bingo's grave, put the dog's wrapped body in the trunk of the car, and drove to the cemetery in the middle of the night. John neatly dug a hole next to his son's tombstone, making sure to remove the sod carefully. I hope we don't get caught, John whispered. They'll think we're grave robbers or something. Or really nuts, added Barbara. Once Bingo was placed in the hole, they replaced the sod so that no one would notice the area had been disturbed. Then they stepped back and bowed their heads. Bingo, said Barbara, you're with Randy now. You two are together again, forever. As they walked away, John and Barbara stopped in their tracks. They heard barking, but not the sad whining from the previous 2 nights. No, this was happy, joyous barking, just like Bingo made whenever he played with his beloved friend, Randy Stevens. So, Aunt Susie, asked Alex, the cemetery people still don't know? No, they never found out. It remained a family secret, Bingo's secret. She patted on the ground beside Randy's grave. Ever since the night that Bingo was buried here, we've been comforted by knowing that they're with each other. Did the barking stop at your house? Alex asked. Yes, however, over the years, people have claimed that while walking by the cemetery late at night, they heard a little boy laugh and a dog bark. Whew, that one hits you, doesn't it? To know that dog was so loyal to that little boy. Okay, Bingo was a collie, so I'm going to try to draw a collie the best that I can. And we'll draw Bingo. If I knew what the boy looked like, I would draw him a side of him, but I'm not that good with humans. Gotta get those ears in. Okay, now he's got hairs. Let's hope I can do this poor doggy justice. You know, yeah, I don't really see that many collies around anymore either. We used to live in, a few years ago, we lived in Tamaqua here in PA, and there was one that had gone missing, and they had a few sightings, but I don't think that they ever found their dog. And they had pictures, and it was a beautiful, beautiful collie, beautiful colorings. And there was some sightings close to where he lived, but then there was also some sightings where he didn't, really far from where he lived. So yeah, I don't know that they've ever found him, but they had a reward up and everything, and every year they would plan a little kind of, what do you want to call it? Where everybody would get together, and then they'd start going wherever anybody heard of where his last sightings were. I mean, some of the pictures people took did look like it could have been this dog. I can't even remember the dog's name. That's so horrible. But it was beautiful. It's a beautiful one. And sometimes I think when people lose their pets, there are people out there who take them in, not realizing, they see this dog, because a lot of times people get, they're not too sure, but they might think that a pet was abandoned, and you get that too, which I don't understand people do that. I mean, I can understand that you have, if you move and you can't take your animals with you, but you shouldn't just leave them behind like that, especially if they were part of your family for so many years. That's just like signing their death sentence, because you know that they're not gonna last too much longer in a strange place, and they'll try to follow you maybe. I've also heard of instances where dogs and cats, well, pets in general, would actually, when the family leaves, and they would either travel real far to find them, or they would travel back to where they lived. If they get lost somewhere or get out, they would find them at their original house where they lived, which is just amazing, because that there are some instances where these dogs would just travel really, really far. There's one foot. Get the other one out here. But yeah, these are one of the dogs that I think are really pretty. I guess growing up, I'm going to show my age, but I really don't. I really don't care at this point. I remember the dog Lassie. I don't know if any of you remember that dog, but I liked watching that. That was a smart dog, I'll tell you. It was really, I mean, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that one also had a boy that it really loved and did a lot with and did a lot for. But yeah, that was a nice doggy. That one was also pretty. They always have pretty markings because they're like a reddish color with dark brown, and just pretty dogs. I think the only dogs we had growing up that I can remember were okay, what are they called? Pekingese. One of my mom's cousins would raise and breed Pekingese dogs, and when she passed, somehow, and I'm not quite sure how, but I'm pretty sure it's because my mom would go visit her pretty often, my mom really liked these dogs, but she had 7 of them, and when she passed, her cousin put it in the will that my mom got all these dogs. So we had a house full of Pekingese dogs. They're cute, but you got to watch where you walk, because they're very low to the ground. And yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting. I know this may sound horrible, but they had a special diet, and we had to try to change that diet, because there was no way we were going to feed them what her cousin fed them. It was disgusting. So yeah, this is the best I can do. But actually, you know what? I made this like a little wiener dog. These dogs are tall. They're not that short. So we're gonna have to extend these legs a little bit here. So this dog looks a little bit taller. I'm sorry, I had to redo everything. I just get it in my head and I'm like, nope, that doesn't look right. And if it doesn't look right, well, then it's not doing justice for that dog, or that animal, or whatever I'm drawing. I mean, I'm not doing very much justice with it now because it looks kind of funky still, but at least the legs are a little bit longer. Yeah, and another dog we had was a white German Shepherd. The story behind that one was my cousin, my cousin, my mom and dad's nephew, found this puppy. Well, it wasn't really a puppy. I mean, it may have been like 2 years old at the time. Found it tied to a tree in the woods, and he couldn't have the dog where he was, so he asked my mom and dad if they would take her in, and so we had her. Her name was Trixie. But yeah, as far as dogs go, I think that was all we ever had. Oh no, my mom had another one, a little yipper. It was a Yorkie. That was her favorite dog ever, and she was they named her Little Guy. I don't know why, and it was spelled weird, like it was a what do you call it? Oriental spelling. But yeah, yeah, that one was a little yipper, little Yorkshire Terrier. I'm kind of a cat person. I mean, my ideal dog would be a wolf dog, of course, and or a husky. I had a husky that was my grandbaby. Okay, that's the best I can do. This here is Bingo, the beloved dog of Randy. May they both rest in peace. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. I shouldn't say enjoyed it, but at least it was interesting enough to, and it was a long one. It kind of had a happy ending at the end. They both got to be together, even after life. We all hope that in the end that happens, that becomes a reality. And so, thank you again for stopping by, listening to the story. And I hope I get to see everybody in the next story. Hit the like button, subscribe, share, and I will see everybody next time. Bye-bye. Thank you.